They relate that Napoleon once saw the Jewish people sitting near the floor and mourning on Tisha B'Av. And he asked, what is this about? And they said, they're mourning the destruction of the temple. And he said, when did it happen? And they told him 1700 years ago. He said, what? 1700 years they're mourning the destruction of their temple? A people who mourns 1700 years for the destruction of a temple is certainly going to see it being rebuilt. And that is the theme of this period of time, when we mourn the destruction of the temple, and Tisha B'Av is next week, which is a fast day for the destruction of the temple, of course. So this is a time to also consider the rebuilding of the temple with the coming of Moshiach. You know, my wife was teaching a group of bat mitzvah girls, and she was talking to them about Moshiach, and she says, Mara Fruma, when we were 5 years old, you taught us in a Hebrew school, and you told us that you're going to come to Israel with Moshiach with us. And it hasn't happened. You know, we've been here in St. Ives 37 years, and we've spoken about Moshiach for 37 years, about his imminent arrival, and he still hasn't come. How do you know it's going to happen? Maybe it's just not happening. So the first answer to it is very simple. If you believe in Torah, you have to believe in Mashiach. Why? Because the Torah has mitzvahs. And majority of the mitzvahs are not applicable without Mashiach. All the mitzvahs about the Beis HaMikdash, about the temple. All the mitzvot about purity and impurity. Mitzvot about kings and Sanhedrin. All those mitzvahs are not applicable today because we don't have the temple in Jerusalem. Because even though there's a plurality of Jews in Israel, there isn't the majority, although that's soon going to become the majority. But even when it becomes the majority of Jews in Israel, it has to be a majority of all the tribes, which we don't even know where most of the tribes are. So that is therefore extremely significant. So for example, if the Jewish people were in a state where you couldn't put on tefillin, you didn't have tefillin, there was no tefillin because you were, heaven forbid, we were all in Auschwitz or you know, something like that, heaven forbid. You would know that state cannot go on for too long because God says you should put on tefillin every day. So there must be the possibility of us doing so. Or if you couldn't keep Shabbos for whatever reason, you would say that this situation cannot last very long because the Torah tells us to keep Shabbos. We have to be able to do so. Well, it's the exact same thing hundreds of times. There are hundreds of mitzvahs that we're not able to keep now. Actually, majority of mitzvahs that are not applicable now. It must be that this is not a permanent state of being. And this is how the Rebbe explains a couple of points of the Rambam. The Rambam, at the end of his book, he writes about the mitzvah of, he writes about Mashiach. And the question is, why does he speak altogether about Mashiach? He's a book of laws. He's not about foretelling prophecies. As a matter of fact, he says in those two chapters, he says we don't exactly know what's going to happen until it happens. So why is he even speaking about it? And the way he opens up, so the Rebbe says like this, and why is it there? Why isn't it in the laws of sacrifices or the laws of the Beis HaMikdash speak about Mashiach there? Why at the end of the book? At the end of his entire magnum opus, the last two chapters about Mashiach. And the Rebbe explains that the first law that he says is Mashiach is going to come, the kingdom of David is going to return, and all the laws of the Torah will come back. We'll build the Beis HaMikdash, we'll have the sacrifices, we'll have the sabbatical year, we'll have the Jubilee year. All these laws that don't apply today biblically are going to be able to be happen. So Rambam is saying Mashiach has to come so the whole book could be fulfilled properly. I told you all the laws in my book, not only laws about that are applicable now, the laws that are going to be applicable when Mashiach comes, which is a distinction between the Rambam and, say, the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo, who only speaks about laws that are applicable now in the time of exile. So all the laws are going to be relevant because Mashiach is going to come. So that's how we know he's coming, because if he doesn't come, the entire Torah is not really true. So we know that this darkness is not a permanent state. Light is coming. You know, there was a journalist, a chassid. He was a journalist. His name was Gershonberg Jacobson. Actually, he's the grandfather of my son-in-law. Anyway, he was, being a journalist, he was able to go into the USSR. So he went into the USSR in the 1970s. And he went to, the Rebbe asked him to bring stuff like tefillin and mezuzahs, etc., and also to visit with the communities and to come to the Rebbe and tell them this what's going on. So he comes to the Rebbe after a visit to Moscow and visit to Russia, and he has a whole night he's sitting with the Rebbe and telling him stories, heart-wrenching stories. Here they sealed a mikveh, here they exiled a sheikhet, here a male was put into prison, etc., etc., etc. All the terrible things that the Soviet Union was doing to Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe actually gets emotional and comes to tears from hearing all these gut-wrenching stories. Just by the way, as a aside, I remember going to Russia myself. It wasn't as bad as the 70s, it was the 80s, 88. One of the things they used to do is they used to take a bottle of whiskey out of a Farbrengen, a bottle of vodka, should be more exact, and each one used to hold it and think messages they want to send the Rebbe, and then they would bring that bottle to the Rebbe. And Gershon Ber actually sat with the Rebbe and told him all the details. Anyway, one such time, standing all throughout the night, he's telling him these stories. In the morning, he's still there till the morning. And the Rebbe then goes to the window, opens the shades, and as the crack of dawn, you see the light starting to come into the room. And the Rebbe would say, a nayatog, a new day has broke. But what he learned from that was that with all the darkness and with all the crying, with all the tears, that's not a state that's going to last. A new day is going to rise, right? New light's coming in. That's what he knew was going to ultimately happen. And he said that with regards to actually in the 80s, I remember they were speaking about that this is certainly happening. There's going to be 1 million Jews coming out of Russia, which happened, of course, in the 90s. The Rebbe foretold it. I remember the Rebbe speaking about it in 1987 in a very strong way. It was unbelievable how it happened. The Rebbe said that they should build cities in Israel for the Russians who are going to come. People didn't understand, what? Like, it's Iron Curtain. And then, of course, a few short years later, the people started to come out, and over 1 million came out. It was remarkable. Why? Because the Rebbe knew this darkness cannot last. So we know that this exile cannot last. We are certainly going to have the Gula, the ultimate redemption. And that's what we concentrate on and focus on, strengthening our faith, strengthening our hope in the imminent arrival of Moshiach.